Hello everyone and welcome to the second game in the first set of XBLIG titles. This one is called Craftimals. And Craftimals is a bit different from all the others because it isn't really an action game of any sort, but it does have an objective, it does have an end game, a goal. And the goal is in the game's subtitle. We are supposed to build to the sun using blocks provided for us in the wheelbarrows on the bottom floor. Now, the game mechanics aren't exactly what you would call nuanced, and there's not really any challenge to the game per se. At first you can only carry 3 blocks, then 10, 20, 40, and eventually 80 and 500 as you reach the checkpoints and get upgrades. Other upgrades include hats and new colors of blocks to toy around with, and eventually a double jump and the option to build at a greater distance away from you. So it's certainly not a game about overcoming obstacles. The thing closest resembling challenge in the game is when you must climb the structure that you've built yourself, and depending on how you built the structure this may be difficult, but the platforming is so simple that it's not likely. So what you have ultimately is a game where the goal is to build your way to the sun with no real obstacles between you and the endpoint. So what is the point of the game really? Can't you just build a staircase all the way up? And the answer is yes, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. In fact, that's probably the fastest way to finish the game. But that's also the quickest way to become bored and frustrated with the game, because each jump raises you 7 height in the air, 7 height units, and there are 5,000 total height units before you reach the sun. Building a staircase all the way up would get very tedious. So instead I decided the best option would be to build structures on my way up, creative little structures without any semblance of relation to something one might see in reality, but structures that I thought would be fun to build while simultaneously taking me upward. This immensely alleviated the boredom. The worst part of the game for me by far was descending all the way back to the ground floor to get more blocks out of wheelbarrows. You can't just drop straight to the bottom without any penalties, but it does take time, a long time depending on how high you get. However, falling all the way down also lets you see all the structures you've built up until that point and gives you a much better sense of progression, so I guess it's a win and lose thing. Now, the way I played this game, it took around 2 hours and 50 minutes to finish, and I did all of that in one sitting. If you just built a staircase straight up, I imagine it would take half that time, if not less. But regardless, the original hefty length of my playthrough video is why you're seeing this in 12 times speed, and I find it remarkable that the game is so slow that even at 12 times speed you can still tell what's going on. Alright, so knowing how the game works, knowing what it is, knowing you can only place and delete 1 block at a time and slowly build your way up to the sun in what someone has called the most tedious thing mankind has ever created, you must be wondering, why did you purchase this one? Only got 18 games and this had to be one of them? Well, there are a couple reasons. The first one is that I have an affinity for games where you build your way to the sun or try to reach the sun in some fashion. Granted, there's only one other game I can think of where this is an element, and it's called Tale of the Sun. But the premise of the game's story automatically meant that I had to give it a shot. The second thing is the sense of discovery. There's a sense of progression and discovery in slowly building your way up to the sun using only your own tools. So, you might ask then, is there any reason aside from sentimental value? And not really. This is probably the most simple game that I purchased from the Xbox Live Indie Games store. And this was probably a really simple game to make in general. It's fairly bare bones, there's not much in the background. I could make all of these graphics, every single graphic in the game. I could make these given sufficient time. I might not be able to program the game, but there's so little going on that I can't imagine that would take much time either. I feel this is important to bring up because although I have a personal sentimental attachment to the game, that doesn't mean that it's not a cynical waste of your time. It may very well be exactly that. I highly doubt the developer himself finished the game. For example, it takes a very long time, and it's much easier to expand a world and not play through it yourself when the game mechanics are this simple. But you know, mentioning the possibility doesn't mean that possibility is accurate. I want to believe firmly that this game is just as naive as it looks at first glance, and there's no sort of intended trickery going on here. They just wanted to make a simple game. It is worth noting that the game is playable cooperatively, locally only of course, and I would recommend that you play the game that way. Seems to make it a lot more fun to build to the sun together. That might be the intended way to play it actually, but, you know, not everyone wants to spend 2 hours and 50 minutes playing Craftimals. I had a good time while it lasted, and I'll probably play it again someday, though not anytime soon. It should be noted that even with my optimistic outlook on the game, and I may very well be the only person with this outlook on the game, that I eventually ran out of ideas shortly after I obtained the double jump upgrade and just cheesed my way to the finish from there. But still, I spent most of the game actually building things. With that out of the way, let me skip to the very end of the game, so that way you can see all the structures I built as we float down, and then see my Craftimal touch the sun, so you can see the ending, if you want to call it that. Yes, here we are in the optimal position to fall down and see everything that we have accomplished thus far. Well, everything that I've accomplished. You weren't here for all of this, you don't deserve to see it, but here it is anyway. As you can see, this is where I started fudging it to get to the top, but shortly we'll get to the structures I actually built. Even though I did make quite the maze of platforming structures for me to traverse on my way back up every time, by this point in the game, what you're seeing right here, I'd memorized all of it. It was all in my muscle memory. There wasn't a single challenging part in all of it. The sections I would previously struggle with due to my short-sighted design, those weren't even a concern anymore. I just mindlessly plowed through all of them because I had to climb back up so many times. Don't worry, we are getting to the structures, I promise. We're almost there. Ah, here we are. Thank you, yes, that was indeed a masterpiece, and I do accept donations in Bitcoin. And also from Patreon. But anyway, we're just gonna cut one last time all the way up to the top so you can see what it's like when we do actually reach the sun.